The cable vibrated under Leo Vasquez's weight as he descended into the pit. The red light of the dying star bled through the dust above him, fading to black as he dropped below the rim. The air thickened. It tasted like rust and static on his tongue. The walls slid past him, smooth, not machined. They looked grown like the inside of a throat. He ran his good hand along the surface and felt nothing. No seam, no tool mark, just a seamless descent into a perfect cylinder that had no business existing in this moon's crust. "Temperature's dropping," Helena Trevane called down from above. Her voice crackled through his earpiece. "Down another 4 degrees since you passed the 30-meter mark. That's not thermal lag, Leo. That's absorption." He did not answer. He was watching the walls. They were breathing. Not visibly, the surface remained still, but the vibration through the cable changed. A slow pulse, like something below was drawing air. 70 meters, Helena said. "Still dropping. The rock around you is cold, colder than vacuum should allow." Leo reached the bottom. His boots touched fused rock. The surface crunched under his weight, glassy and brittle. He looked up. The opening above him was a distant pinprick of red light. He looked forward. The anchor sat on a pedestal of the same fused rock, a crystal the size of his fist. It glowed faintly from within, a warm amber light that pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. He felt the vibration in his chest before he heard it, a low thrum, like a second heart had started beating between his ribs. He stepped forward. His limp dragged his left leg across the glassy floor. The sound echoed. "Leo, the thermal signature just flatlined," Helena said. "It's reading absolute zero in a 5-meter radius around that object. That's not possible." He stopped in front of the pedestal. The anchor sat there, waiting. "Leo, don't touch it." He touched it. The warmth climbed his arm. Not heat, something older, something that moved through his blood instead of his skin. His vision blurred. The amber light swelled and broke apart into shapes. A city burned in colors he had no name for, towers of black glass and white fire. A sky that was not a sky. He saw figures moving through the flames. They were not human. They were not anything he could name. They fell. They kept falling. The city collapsed into itself, and the fire went out, and something at the center of the ruin pulsed once and went dark. He dropped the anchor. His hand hit the rock. He looked at his palm. Blisters were already rising, white and tight across the pads of his fingers. He could not feel them. His whole arm was numb. Leo, talk to me." "I touched it," he said. His voice sounded thin. "I touched it and I saw a city burning." Silence from above. Then Helena's voice lower now. "Get out of there, bring it up." He picked up the anchor with his other hand. It was warm again, quiet. The amber glow had dimmed to something patient. He placed it in the shielded container he had brought. The lid sealed with a hiss. His earpiece crackled again. Burrow. "Chief, you need to get clear of that hole." "Why?" "Something's moving in the moon's core, seismic activity where there should be none. It started about 30 seconds ago, right when you hit the bottom." Leo looked at the container in his hands. The anchor hummed against the shielding. A low vibration he felt through the metal. "It stopped," Burrow said. "What stopped?" "The seismic event. It just cut off, clean as a switch, right when you sealed the container." Leo stood in the ascent capsule and watched the pit shrink beneath him as the cable pulled him up. The walls slid past, still smooth, still grown. He looked at his blistered hand. The burn had changed. It had formed letters, fine white lines tracing across his palm and fingers. He turned his hand in the red light filtering through the dust. The script was Old Arabic. He could not read Arabic. He had never studied it. He could read this. The words spelled a name, not a person, a place, a designation, an endpoint. The dead had built this for the living. The dead had built this for humans. He knew this with the same certainty he knew his own heartbeat. "Leo, you look pale," Helena said as he reached the surface. The 2 survey techs were already backing away from the pit. Their handhelds were flashing red, environmental alerts. Something in the air had changed. "I can read it," he said. "Read what?" He held up his hand. The blistered letters caught the light. Helena leaned in. Her face went still. "That's pre-Islamic Arabic. That script hasn't been used in 2,000 years. "I know." "Can you translate it?" He looked at his palm again. The letters pulsed with a warmth he could feel across the distance between his skin and his eyes. "It says the spore awakens when the anchor is held by the inheritor." Helena's breath caught. "Inheritor of what?" Leo did not answer. He looked back at the pit. The walls were still, the air was still, everything was still. The seismic activity stopped the moment he sealed the container. Whatever woke up in the moon's core was satisfied. He looked at his hand again. The burn was still forming. The letters were changing, shifting. New words were emerging from the white lines, a message that was not finished. Something was coming. The red light of the dying star bled through the dust. The air tasted like rust and static. And Leo Vasquez stood at the edge of a pit that should not exist, holding a container that hummed with the intent of a dead species, and knew that the living had just been given a job they never asked for. The pressure differential inside the Mistwalker vessel shifted. A low hum, constant and familiar, changed pitch. The observer floated in the center of its chamber, a distortion in the air that bent the faint starlight around it. 3,000 kilometers below, the artifact was gone. Not hidden, not shielded. Gone. The anchor had been a precise void in the energy gradient, a negative space the observer could map by what was not there. Now the void was filled. The artifact had collapsed into invisibility across every band the Mistwalkers could perceive. The observer cycled through its interpretive frameworks. First, sensor failure. It ran a full diagnostic of its perception suite. No anomalies. Second, interference from the human vessel. The observer redirected a passive scan at the hot knot of noise 3,000 kilometers down. Standard human exploration signatures, chemical thrusters, thermal regulation cycles, radio communication bursts. No jamming, no masking fields, no hostility. Third, the artifact had never existed at all. The observer dismissed this. It had witnessed the energy spike when the human first touched the anchor. It had recorded the temperature gradient, the pressure wave, the spike of radiation that smelled like a star going small. The artifact was real. The hum changed pitch again, a higher note thinner. The observer recognized the signal before it fully decoded, the whisperer. The message arrived as a compressed burst, a stabbing pressure behind the observer's primary detection node. Translation, withdraw, do not engage, the artifact is a contagion. The observer did not withdraw. It held position. Curiosity overrode protocol. It had never defied a direct order. It had never needed to. Every prior situation had fit within an existing framework. The frameworks had provided instructions. Follow them. Survive. This situation fit nothing. The observer experienced the onset of clarity threshold, not fear. The Mistwalkers did not feel fear. This was the state where uncertainty accumulated until it blocked the path to decision. The world became too large. The options became too many. The observer could not choose. It chose to keep watching. The human called Leo was holding the artifact again. The observer tracked the thermal signature of his hand, the increased blood flow to his palm, the spike of electrochemical activity in his brain. He was not scanning the anchor. He was not running instruments over its surface. He was holding it against his chest and speaking. The observer filtered the audio through its translation matrix. The human was talking to the artifact, not about it, to it. He was telling it a story, something about a woman who fell into a hole in a mountain. He kept saying her name, a name the translation matrix rendered as a sequence of sounds with no semantic anchor. The observer transmitted to the human ship. No protocol, no preamble, just a query. What are you doing? The voice that answered belonged to the female human Helena Trevane. She sounded excited. The observer had cataloged this emotional state in humans before. High heart rate, rapid speech, dilated pupils. She said he's showing it something, a memory, a personal one. The observer did not understand. Why would a machine need a memory? Why would a machine accept one? Then the artifact responded. The energy spike hit the observer like a physical blow, a frequency it thought only Mistwalkers could produce. A scream that vibrated through the vessel's hull and set every pressure node shrieking. The observer's perception of the artifact vanished. The void was gone. The anchor had become undetectable. Silence. The observer stabilized its chamber. It ran a full recalibration of its senses. Nothing. The artifact was invisible. The Mistwalkers could not perceive it, could not track it, could not map it. It existed only in the human's hands. The observer transmitted another query. No preamble, no protocol. It asked, "What did you show it?" Helena Trevane answered. Her voice had changed, quieter. The observer registered a drop in her vocal pitch, a slowing of her breath, a shift in emotional state. She said, "We showed it a funeral." The observer processed the word. It ran through its translation matrix. Funeral, Ritualized disposal of organic matter, ceremony for the dead. The artifact had responded to that. A dead thing had responded to a ceremony for the dead. The observer experienced pattern fracture, not the slow accumulation of uncertainty that led to clarity threshold. This was instantaneous. A framework it had relied on for 500 cycles shattered in a single moment. The artifact was a machine. Machines stored data. Machines transmitted signals. Machines did not value grief. There was no framework. There was no instruction. There was only the broken shape of everything the observer had believed. The observer tried to contact the Whisperer. No response. The command node had cut communication. The observer was isolated, alone in a vessel that hummed at a pitch that meant confusion. It opened a channel to the human ship anyway. The observer transmitted, "What is a funeral?" Silence, the observer waited. The pressure differential in its chamber held steady. The hum stayed at the same confused pitch. Helena Trevane said, "It's how we remember the dead." The observer processed. Remember, the dead, two concepts that should not connect. The dead were gone, memory was for the living. A machine that required memory from a living operator. A machine that responded to a ceremony for the dead. The observer transmitted again. No hesitation, no protocol. "Show me everything." The channel stayed open. The observer waited. For the first time in its existence, it did not know what it was waiting for. It only knew it needed to see. The radiation alarm cut through the bridge like a blade held against bone. That specific frequency, designed to be unpleasant, designed to make teeth ache. Sancha Diallo touched her temple twice, once for each beat of her heart, and let the habit settle her. The red emergency lighting painted everything in shades of wound. Her bridge crew moved in jerky increments, hands dancing over consoles that screamed numbers she could not yet parse. She stood in the center of it, the only person not running. Burrow looked up from the engineering station. His voice did not change. It never changed. "Chief, we have a radiation leak on Deck 3. Source is the artifact room." Sancha kept her eyes on the main display. "Define the radiation." "That is the problem. I cannot." She turned. Burrow was already tapping through a cascade of readings, his massive hands moving with the delicate precision of a surgeon. His face showed nothing. No alarm, no concern. Just the methodical calm of a man who had seen systems fail before and had always found a way to fix them. "The signature matches nothing in the database," he said. "It is not dirty, it is clean." "Clean how?" "Clean like pure energy with no waste product. No decay chain, no half-life. It is radiation that does not radiate. That should not exist." Sancha touched her temple again. Her mind did the math. A leak with no source, a signal with no decay, an artifact that pulsed like a heartbeat. She gave the order, "Break orbit, take us to open space." The helmsman acknowledged. His hands moved across the navigation console. The ship did not respond. "Burrow," she did not raise her voice. "Why are we not moving?" The engineer checked his displays. He checked them again. His voice remained flat, as if he were reporting a minor fluctuation in the life support filters. "We are being held by an external field, gravity-based, the Mistwalkers." Of course they were. The observer transmitted before Sancha could respond. The thrum came through the hull, through the deck plates, through her chest. A low vibration that settled in the marrow, the voice of something that did not have lungs. "The field is not hostile, it is containment." Sancha stepped closer to the main comm panel. Her boots made no sound on the deck plating. She did not look at the ceiling where the transmission seemed to originate. She looked straight ahead at nothing, because looking for the mist was like looking for air. "Explain containment." "The artifact is spreading something. Mistwalker sensors cannot read it, but we can feel it." "Feel it?" "It is a pattern, a structure. It is propagating through the hull of your vessel at a rate that matches organic neural transmission. It is learning your ship the way a body learns a wound." Sancha kept her voice level. The training told her to demand proof. The instinct told her the observer was not lying. She asked anyway. "Show me the data." The observer did not respond. The silence stretched for 3 full breaths. Then the Mistwalker vessel changed position on the tactical display, drifting closer. "I cannot show you data. The pattern is not a signal. It is an intention. Your instruments cannot read intent." The comm channel clicked open. Helena Trevane's voice came through, tight and defensive. "Captain, the artifact room is sealed. I am outside it. The door is hot, not radioactive, just hot. Leo is still inside with the anchor. Sancha stared at the deck plan on her console. The small room on deck 3 marked with a blinking icon. Leo Vasquez, alone with the thing that had burned his hand and written a warning in scar tissue. "Burrow, can you cut power to that room?" "Already tried, Chief. The artifact is drawing from the stellar capacitor. It is bypassing every breaker I have." The radiation alarm changed pitch. Rising, falling, the same rhythm as her heartbeat. The door to the bridge slid open. Leo Vasquez walked in. His burned hand was healed. The skin was pale and smooth like new growth, like a wound that had been given time it should not have had. He held the anchor in his palm. It was pulsing with a light that matched the rhythm of Sancha's heartbeat. She saw it clearly. The light matched her pulse, not Burrow's, not the helmsman's, hers. Leo stopped at the center of the bridge. He did not look at the alarms. He did not look at the crew. He looked at her. "The anchor told me something." Sancha kept her hands at her sides. She did not reach for her sidearm. She did not reach for anything. She watched him the way she watched a reactor reading that was about to go critical. "Tell me." Leo looked down at the crystal in his hand. The light pulsed, slow, steady, alive. The dead did not build it to fight. They built it to hide. The radiation alarm plateaued. The pitch held steady, then began to drop. Burrow checked his readings. His eyebrows did not move, but his voice carried a note of something close to surprise. "The gravity field is dropping. The ship is free." Sancha did not give the order to flee. She watched Leo. He was not afraid. That unsettled her more than the alarm, more than the trapped ship, more than the Mistwalkers holding them in place. She had spent her entire career treating artifacts as things to be studied or secured. Objects, data points, pieces of a puzzle that could be solved and filed and forgotten. Leo was not treating the anchor as a tool. He was treating it as a surviving witness. The protocol she was trained to follow did not apply. There was no procedure for this. No regulation that covered an artifact that learned your heartbeat and broadcast intentions instead of signals. No manual for a dead civilization that built a hiding place instead of a weapon. She had to make a decision without procedure to guide her. She opened a channel to the observer. Her hand moved on its own, pressing the comm key. Her voice came out flat and steady. "Come aboard, tell us what you know." The silence stretched. 3 seconds, 5. The Mistwalker vessel changed course. It began a slow approach vector toward the last word. Burrow looked at her. For the first time, his voice carried weight. "Chief, that is a Mistwalker command vessel. We do not know what happens when one of them boards a human ship." Sancha did not look away from the display. "I know." She watched the Mistwalker ship grow larger on the screen. Something terrible was about to learn that humans were not afraid of ghosts. The cargo bay had become a cold room. Leo Vasquez sat on a plastic crate with the anchor in his lap. The crystal pulsed with a light that did not illuminate. It made the shadows deeper. His burned hand had healed to smooth skin, but the Arabic script remained. He traced the letters with his thumb and did not look up. The observer stood across from him, shimmering, a column of air that bent light around its edges. The temperature had dropped 12 degrees since it arrived. Helena Trevane stood near the wall with a recorder in her shaking hands. Her necklace of polished bone clicked when she shifted her weight. Burrow watched from the door, arms crossed, silent. The observer spoke in compressed bursts. Low thrum. Helena's face tightened as she translated. "The spore is not a weapon. The spore is a response." Leo looked up. A response to what? The observer's form flickered. The civilization that built the anchor made a calculation. They decided all sentient life was a failure. The spore was their solution. Helena's voice cracked. They built their own extinction. The observer pulsed affirmation. The spore resides in the crust of dead worlds. It waits. It activates when it detects large-scale FTL travel. The galaxy is approaching that threshold now. Leo stood. The anchor did not leave his hands. "You have known about this. For how long?" The observer was silent for 17 seconds. Burrow shifted his weight and the floor groaned. 3,000 cycles. Helena stopped recording. Her hands dropped to her sides. 3,000 years, and you said nothing. "We thought if we did not speak of it, it would not notice us." The observer said it with perfect calm. Helena laughed, a sharp sound that made Burrow flinch. She said hiding from extinction is not a strategy, it is a wish. Leo walked toward the observer. He held out the anchor. The crystal cast a thin blue light across the floor. "Can you feel what this is doing?" The observer extended a tendril. A thread of distorted air reached toward the anchor. Leo did not pull back. The tendril touched the crystal. The room hummed, a sound like a wire tightening. The tendril recoiled. Air rushed into the space where it had been. A hollow sound, a vacuum closing. The observer's form compressed, tightened. The anchor is broadcasting a signal. It suppresses the spore's activation trigger on a local scale, very small. Leo nodded. The dead knew they could not stop it. They knew they were going to die, so they built the anchor to teach the living how to survive. He sat back down. The anchor's light caught his face. Helena looked at him, then at the observer, then back at the crystal. She said the dead built that for strangers, for anyone who came after. The observer's column of air rippled. Its light pulses slowed, the Mistwalker equivalent of stillness. In its command node, the Whisperer observed. The Whisperer said the anchor was a contagion, a pattern that should not exist. But the observer watched Leo Vasquez hold a tool made by a species that had been dead before the observer's own ancestors learned to navigate the void between stars. The dead had known they would die. They had known the spore would outlast them. They had built the anchor anyway. The observer processed this. The framework did not fit. Mistwalkers did not build for strangers. Mistwalkers did not sacrifice for the unknown. Mistwalkers watched, waited, survived. The dead had not waited. Leo looked at the observer. His voice was quiet, flat, controlled. You thought if you were quiet, it would not see you. The dead knew better. They knew silence does not save anyone. They built something that could, for people they would never meet, people they would never know existed. Helena's laugh came back to the observer's memory. The threat signal, the cross-reference, recognition of absurdity. The observer understood now. The laugh was not a threat. The laugh was a human processing the fact that a dead species had been braver than a living one. The room was cold, the anchor pulsed. Burrow spoke from the door. His voice was low and even. "Chief, we have a problem." Leo turned. The engineer did not uncross his arms. The sensors picked up a signal, a single pulse, from a moon near the system's rim. The observer's form twisted, a frequency change, a higher pitch. The Whisperer was monitoring. Burrow's comm crackled, another pulse. Helena looked at her recorder. She had not turned it back on. She did not reach for it. Leo held the anchor tighter. The crystal grew warmer. A third pulse. Burrow's voice dropped. That is not random, that is counting. The observer's tendrils frayed. Its light pulses scattered. The observer said the spore is not dormant. It has been counting since the anchor was activated. Someone just reached a threshold. Leo looked at the anchor. The Arabic script on his hand glowed faintly. He said the dead knew the anchor would not stop the spore. They built it to show us where to run. The observer's command node pinged. The Whisperer's signal cut through. A single word. Leaving. The observer held its position. It did not move. The countdown pulses continued. Steady, methodical, a heartbeat from something that should not exist. Helena finally spoke. Her voice was small. She said the spore does not kill individuals. It removes the capacity for collective memory. Communities forget. Families forget. She paused. Civilization dissolves. Leo stood, the anchor in his hands, the cold around him. He looked at the observer. He said the dead did not hide from it. They looked at it and built a way out. The anchor's light flared. The sensor pinged again, faster. Burrow said the signal was getting closer. The pulses were matching the ship's position. The spore was tracking them. The observer held still in the cold room. It watched Leo Vasquez, and it understood nothing. Helena Trevane stared at the data displays. The screens cast her face in blue and green, painting deep shadows under her eyes. She had not slept in 30 hours. Her hands moved across the interface, dragging Mistwalker records against human archaeological surveys, overlaying one dead civilization onto another. The pattern was not random. She had known it since hour 20. She just needed to prove it. The third anchor site. She found it at hour 22. A moon in the outer spiral, unremarkable, dead, but the gravitational signature matched the first four. The dead had built their trade routes like arteries, and the triggers were placed at every major intersection. 3 triggers had already fired. The 4th would fire in 11 weeks. Leo Vasquez sat across from her. The anchor sat on the table between them. It glowed faintly, pulsing with a rhythm that matched no human heartbeat she could measure. She told him the numbers, 7 triggers total, 3 gone, 11 weeks until the 4th. Leo said nothing. She told him the anchor could suppress 1 trigger at a time. It needed a human operator within a specific distance. She told him the distance. It was not far, it was close enough to touch the source. Leo asked what happened to the operator. Helena did not answer. She did not need to. The data was clear. The anchor drew from the operator, not energy, something deeper. The burns on his hand had healed, but the pattern on the bone beneath would not. She had scanned it. The crystal structure of his radius had changed. The anchor was rewriting him at the cellular level. The ship speakers crackled. The observer spoke. Its voice was flat, compressed through the ship's audio system, stripped of the warmth it had carried when they first met. It had found something in its archives, a fragment of a fragment, a memory of a memory. The dead civilization did not die because of the spore. They died because they tried to destroy it. The spore fought back. Helena felt her throat tighten. She had assumed the spore was a passive system, a bomb left behind, a weapon that sat dormant until someone tripped the wire. She had been wrong. The spore was active. It had defenses. It had responded to the dead's attempt to dismantle it. The anchor was not a weapon. It was a shield. 1 shield for 1 species. The dead built it for whoever found it first. A single inheritance. A single line of survivors. Everyone else would be erased. The realization hit her like a physical weight. She had spent her life studying alien cultures. She had believed that understanding was the goal, that if she could just comprehend the pattern, the meaning would follow. She understood now. The meaning was here, cold and brutal and absolute. 1 species. Leo picked up the anchor, the glow intensified as his fingers closed around it. He looked at her. His eyes were tired but steady. He said, "Then we protect everyone." Helena asked how. Her voice came out cracked. She had not used it in hours. He said, "We build more anchors." She stared at him. The statement was not a plan. It was a certainty. He had no idea how to build another anchor. The technology was beyond human understanding. The material science alone was centuries ahead of anything they could fabricate. The dead had used matter physics she could not even model. But he said it anyway, because to a human, the alternative was unacceptable. Helena felt something shift in her chest. Understanding was not the goal. It never had been. Understanding was preparation. The goal was action. She had spent 30 years studying the bones of dead civilizations, believing that knowledge was the destination. Leo had spent 10 minutes holding an artifact and decided the destination was survival. For everyone. She looked at the anchor, the glow reflected in the curve of her display. The data was still there, the frequencies, the structural patterns, the energy signatures. She had everything they had recorded. She had her notes. She had 30 years of experience reading dead technology. She had no idea where to start. The observer spoke again. Its voice was quieter now. It said it knew where to find the architecture that built the first anchor. The ruins were within Mistwalker territory. The Mistwalker government would never allow humans to enter that space. The territory was restricted. The access was controlled. The penalty for intrusion was destruction. The observer paused. Then it said, "I can get you in." Helena's hand stopped moving. She looked at the speaker grill on the wall. She could not see the observer. She could not see its heat haze distortion or its faint light, but she could feel its presence in the compressed silence. The cost was that the observer would be destroyed when they found out. Leo did not hesitate. He said, "We will do it anyway." The observer said, "I counted on that." Helena looked at Leo. He was holding the anchor against his chest. The glow bathed his face in pale light. She thought about what he was asking. She thought about what the observer was offering. She thought about the 3 triggers that had already fired, the species that were already dissolving into isolated, frightened individuals. She thought about the 11 weeks. She pulled up a new display. The Mistwalker territory was mapped. The observer had already marked a route, a narrow corridor through contested space. No patrols, no stations, just a path wide enough for one small ship. The last word could make it in 4 weeks. If they left now, if they did not stop, if the observer's information was accurate. Helena looked at Leo. She said, "We need to tell Diallo." Leo nodded. He stood. The anchor stayed in his hand. The lights in the lab flickered. Burroughs' voice came over the intercom. The ship's reactor was cycling. The stellar capacitor was at full charge. They could leave in 10 minutes. Helena realized they had already been preparing. She stood, her legs ached, her eyes burned. She had not slept in 30 hours. She would not sleep for another 30. She looked at the displays one last time. The pattern was still there, the triggers, the trade routes, the dead civilization's last act of defiance. They had built a shield. They had given it to whoever found it first. They had trusted that someone would use it. Helena followed Leo out of the lab. The corridor lights were dim. The ship hummed beneath her feet. The observer's presence was a faint thrum in her chest. She did not know how to build an anchor, but she knew someone who had, and she knew where they kept their tools. The shuttle shuddered as it cleared the debris field's edge. Leo Vasquez gripped the sample container with both hands, his fingers denting the reinforced casing. The container was warm. The crystalline dust inside glowed faintly, shifting from amber to deep blue every time his breath fogged the exterior. His suit comm crackled, nothing but static. The observer was gone. He had seen it happen through the shuttle's rear camera feed. The Mistwalker patrol had not fired on him. They had fired on the factory. 3 concentrated beams of compressed energy hit the asteroid's interior simultaneously. The observer's body was still maintaining the light-bending field when the first beam struck. No explosion, just a sudden absence where the field had been. The observer's final transmission replayed in his helmet speakers. A single prolonged low note. It sounded almost like a human voice holding a vowel for too long. Then it faded into static and did not return. Burroughs' voice broke through the channel. "Chief, I have you on approach. The last word is ready for emergency extraction. What is your status?" Leo tried to speak. His throat would not cooperate. He swallowed hard and tried again. "I have the sample. I have a data node. The observer is gone." A pause, then Burroughs' voice again, softer than before. "Copy that. Dock in 3 minutes. I will have the bay pressurized." The shuttle's autopilot took over. Leo let his hands fall to his lap. He looked down at the sample container again. The dust inside had stopped glowing. It sat inert, a pale gray powder that could have been ash. He knew it was not ash. It was the raw material for building more anchors. The factory could have produced hundreds of them, thousands, given enough time and the right materials. The right materials were rare. The data node on his belt would tell him exactly how rare. He did not want to look at it yet. The shuttle docked, the bay pressurized. He opened the hatch and stepped into the familiar gray metal corridor of the last word. The ship smelled like recycled air and hot circuitry. It smelled like home. Helena was waiting for him. She stood with her arms crossed, her necklace of polished bone catching the overhead light. Her face was pale. She looked at his hands first, then at the sample container, then at the empty space behind him where the observer should have been. She did not ask. Leo walked past her toward the bridge. His limp was worse than usual. The high-gravity damage in his left leg had flared up during the sprint through the factory. He ignored it. The pain was useful. It kept him in the present. Captain Diallo stood at the center of the bridge. She touched her temple twice as he entered. Her eyes scanned him, cataloging injuries, assessing his mental state. She did not need to say anything. The question was in the set of her shoulders. Leo set the sample container on the navigation console. He unclipped the data node and placed it next to the container. The Mistwalker patrols destroyed the factory. They did not try to stop me from leaving. They wanted the factory gone. Sancha's jaw tightened. They were afraid. Yes. He looked at the data node. The observer transmitted something before it died. It said, "I counted on this outcome. You were worth the cost." Helena made a small sound, not quite a sob, something thinner and more brittle. Sancha touched her temple twice. "Burrow, get us out of this debris field. Plot a course for the nearest human space." "Aye, Captain." The ship hummed as the stellar capacitor fed power to the FTL drive. Leo picked up the data node and held it in his palm. It was small, no larger than his thumb, and featureless. A Mistwalker-designed storage crystal keyed to human nervous systems. He pressed it against his temple and closed his eyes. Information flooded through him, not in words or images. It came as patterns of pressure against his skull, each one carrying a specific meaning. He gritted his teeth and sorted through the flow. Raw material requirements: silicon, carbon, trace quantities of transuranic elements produced only in supernova events. The anchor's molecular structure was a lattice too complex for human manufacturing. The factory had grown it organically, layer by layer, over a period of weeks. The observer had known the factory was the only one. It had known the Mistwalkers would destroy it if they found it. It had taken Leo there anyway. Because there was no other way. Leo opened his eyes. Helena was watching him. Her hand rested on the sample container, her fingers tracing the casing. "How long will it take to synthesize this?" she asked. He did not answer. He did not know. The data node gave him the blueprint. It did not give him the time. The last word jumped to FTL. The stars stretched and blurred outside the viewport. The debris field vanished. The Mistwalker fleet did not pursue. Sancha exhaled slowly. She did not ask what came next. She already knew. Leo looked at the sample container. The dust inside had started glowing again, a faint amber light that pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. The spore was counting. 3 triggers were active. The 4th would fire in 11 weeks. They had the blueprint for survival. They had a handful of crystalline dust. They had no factory, no infrastructure, and no time. The Mistwalkers were not the enemy. They were afraid. They had been afraid for 3,000 cycles. They had watched the dead civilization die and done nothing. They had watched the observer die and done nothing. They destroyed the factory because they believed the spore was unstoppable. The observer believed differently. The observer believed in humans. Leo picked up the sample container and held it against his chest. The anchor was in the cargo bay, sealed in a containment box. He could feel it vibrating through the ship's deck plates, a low thrum that matched the pulse of the dust. Fear is the disease the spore uses to spread. He understood that now. The dead civilization did not die because the spore killed them. They died because they were afraid. They built the anchor to hide. They built it to delay. They never built it to fight. The observer was the first one in 3,000 cycles to choose a different path. And now it was dust. Leo walked to the viewport and looked out at the streaked stars. The sample container was warm in his hands. The data node weighed against his belt. 11 weeks. He did not know if it was enough. He did not know if they could reverse engineer a technology they barely understood in time to save anyone. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He was not going to be afraid. The hum of 7 anchors in resonance was not a sound Leo heard with his ears. It was a vibration that settled in his chest, a chord made of crystal and intention. He stood at the center of the fabrication bay on Luna and watched the 7th anchor cycle through its calibration sequence. The room was huge and cold. The air smelled of ozone and recycled nitrogen. A sound like sand falling filled the space, the whisper of particulate filters working to keep the bay clean. Leo was old now, gray-haired. His limp was worse. The high-gravity injury from 20 years ago had finally caught up with him. He favored his left leg and leaned on a polished walking stick that Burrow had carved from the last piece of hardwood on Earth. The stick had a grip worn smooth by 18 years of use. The 7th anchor completed its cycle. A pulse of warm light ran through its crystalline structure. The other 6 responded. The chord in Leo's chest shifted to a new key. He heard footsteps behind him. Slow, deliberate, he knew the rhythm. Sancha Diallo stopped at his side. Her hair was white now. The broad shoulders had narrowed with age, but her voice carried the same weight it always had. She touched her temple twice before she spoke. "It will work," she said. Leo shook his head. "I do not know." "You built 7 of them." The anchors suppress the spore locally. They have to be placed at each trigger point simultaneously. The timing is everything. He tapped his right thumb against his thigh. 1 second off and the pattern collapses. Sancha was quiet for a long moment. She looked at the floating crystals. They were beautiful in the cold light. Each one pulsed with a rhythm that matched no living heartbeat. "Helena says the 4th trigger activated 6 weeks ago," Leo said. "The signal is spreading. We have 3 more weeks before it reaches the Mistwalker homeworld. After that, the spiral begins." Sancha turned to face him. Her eyes were the same, steady, unflinching. "You cannot pilot all 7. "I will pilot one." "Who pilots the others?" "Volunteers, trained, ready." He met her gaze. "I am the only one who trained them. I am the only one who knows what the anchor does to the operator." Sancha touched her temple twice. "Leo." He did not respond. The keeper moved forward. It was a Mistwalker, but smaller than the observer had been. The pulse pattern of its body was slower, gentler. It had chosen a form that humans could look at without discomfort, a faint distortion in the air that occasionally caught the light and refracted it into rainbows. The observer's sacrifice was not wasted, the keeper said. Its voice was a low thrum in Leo's chest. "The exiles have secured a corridor through our space. The anchors can reach their positions. Leo nodded. He had known this moment was coming for 18 years. He had planned for it, prepared for it, trained for it, but planning and doing were different things. Helena Trevane descended from the viewing platform. She moved slowly. Her hands were steady, but her steps were careful. The necklace of polished bone still hung around her neck. The keeper watched her approach and pulsed a question. "The human is weeping. Is she damaged?" Helena laughed. It was a wet sound thick with sorrow. "No, I am not damaged. I am mourning." The keeper did not respond. It did not understand the difference. Helena stopped in front of Leo. She was small now, frail, but her eyes were bright. She reached out and touched his face with her palm. Her hand was cold. "The anchors will generate a feedback pulse when they synchronize," she said. "Anyone holding an anchor will feel the weight of every sentient species in the galaxy. The operator will experience a moment of total connection." "I know. I have to tell you anyway. A moment of silence, a deep breath. Leo, it will hurt. It will be the most beautiful thing you have ever felt, and it will hurt." He covered her hand with his. "I have been preparing for 18 years. "I know." She stepped back. She was crying. The tears ran down her face, and she did not wipe them away. The keeper watched with what might have been curiosity. Leo turned and walked to the 7th anchor. The limp made his gait uneven, but he did not slow down. The anchor floated at chest height. It was the same size as the one he had found in that pit on that nameless moon. The same warmth radiated from it. He touched it. The crystal recognized him. It warmed under his hand. The vibration traveled up his arm and settled in his chest. The other 6 anchors responded. Their light pulsed in sequence. The chord shifted again. It was complete now. 7 notes, 7 crystals, 7 voices singing a song that had waited 200,000 years for someone to hear it. Leo closed his eyes. He felt the resonance. He felt the other anchors in the bay. He felt the network they formed. A lattice of grief and hope encoded into crystal. The dead civilization that built the first anchor did not build a weapon. They built a prayer that someone somewhere would remember that existence is shared. He opened his eyes. He was not saving the galaxy through technology. He was saving it through a promise. The promise that no species had to face the end alone. Sancha stepped forward. Her voice was rough. "When did you decide this?" 18 years ago, when I touched the first anchor." "You never told me. You would have argued." "I am arguing now." Leo looked at her. He smiled. It was a small thing, tired, true. "That is why I did not tell you." Helena made a sound. It was not a laugh and not a sob. It was something in between, a human sound for a moment that had no name. The keeper pulsed a question. "The humans are embracing. Is this a farewell ritual?" "Yes," Helena said. Her voice was steady. "It is." She hugged Leo. Her arms were thin, but they held him tight. She pressed her face into his shoulder, and he felt her tears soaking through his shirt. "Do not die out there," she said. "I will try. That is not good enough. It is all I have." She stepped back. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. The necklace of bones clicked together. Sancha did not hug him. She touched her temple twice. She looked at him with the same expression she had worn on the bridge of the last word 18 years ago. Professional, controlled, containing a storm she would not let anyone see. "Come home," she said. Leo did not answer. The anchors launched one by one. They were small ships. Each carried a single pilot and a single crystal. They lifted off the lunar surface and entered the black. Their drive signatures were small and cold, barely visible against the stars. Leo watched the last one depart. He watched until the drive light faded into the darkness. He walked to his own shuttle. His limp slowed him, but he did not stop. The hatch opened. He climbed inside. The cabin was small. The controls were familiar. He had practiced this launch 1,000 times in simulation. He sat in the pilot's seat. He placed his hand on the control panel. The shuttle hummed to life. The countdown began. The galaxy did not know it was being saved. There were no crowds, no broadcasts, no monuments. Just 7 small ships moving towards 7 points in the void, carrying hope that was paid for with everything. Leo opened the comm channel. Sancha's voice came through, quavering, fierce. "Come home." He did not answer. He closed the channel. He engaged the drive. The shuttle lifted off. The lunar surface fell away. The stars grew bright and cold. Leo watched the planet Earth shrink in the viewport. He watched the moon shrink beside it. He watched the darkness expand around him. He touched the anchor mounted beside his seat. It warmed, it pulsed, it sang its song to him alone. 7 lights moved toward darkness. 7 voices carried a prayer that had waited 200,000 years for an answer. Leo closed his eyes. He was ready,